See everyone. I'm just barely back late last evening because of flight delays, but it's good to be here this morning, my morning, and see all these beautiful faces. And at least one person I was with in person, Rosemary. She's back home too. We'll have more people coming, I'm sure. I see them. So let's begin our sitting. sitting together in this way, um, even online and from all the various locations that we come from, we connect to one place. And that one place is a space of grace. They sound a bit alike here, so I want to make sure you hear what I'm suggesting. It's an immense grace that we have the opportunity to sit silently together in this kind of stillness and peace, which on the surface seems like absolutely nothing. But it seems that way only to those parts of us who always want to endeavor to do something and to get something from that doing. And we discover the truth is that as we sit in silence and stillness in the midst of this busy world and our busy minds and active bodies, we come to know the vast, boundless stillness and silence, which is always with us, but is often unnoticed, unrecognized, certainly not realized or embodied unless we practice this sitting. This is our Zazen practice. And because of the gratitude for this boundless generosity and grace that we're offered, we sit upright with some dignity and attention to our posture and our breath, not because we're creating anything, but we're celebrating with some dignity, some reverence, what we come to know is most true about us. Our Buddha nature, that the light of enlightenment, the light within us, is calling us to practice. Enlightenment is the beginning, is the entry point of practice. That's what's called us online today. So we stop and notice so that it might manifest in our lives and as our lives, which it is doing anyway, but to wake up to this reality shapes us differently as we move through the world with ourselves and with each other. In just a few minutes, when the bell rings, it's to indicate that we'll shift our attention a bit and we'll mark that shift with our chant, the verse of the robe. We will remind ourselves of what I'm speaking of, that we are cloaked in the vast robe of liberation. We're always wrapped in that and living out that reality. Vast is the robe of liberation. And its basic goodness, basic sanity, a formless field of benefaction. Without taking a solid conditioned form, it moves through all conditions and all forms. And as we embody the teachings, most simply through zazen, by attending to our posture, attending to our breath, wearing the universal teaching, sitting, wearing the universal teaching, we realize this one true nature which manifests as our lives, this great, generous, beneficent grace, this riverbed of mercy through which our lives flow, bringing forth light, which has called us, so we can sustain that light as a gift in the world. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. It's wonderful to see your faces as always. Um, it was a real joy to be um, in person with quite a number of our larger Sangha members in Minneapolis at the Awakening Together um, retreat this past week, and to have many of you online as well. But there's a certain kind of nourishment that also comes with being able to sit with others in person, which is really lovely. And then we bring it to these times when we have the great uh, opportunity to meet when we can't be in person. And thank goodness we have this. A number of you know, but I will say in case you don't, that one of our teachers, Suzanne Kilkus, um, on the 9th of October last week, her husband died. He'd been ill, and so maybe it's already been announced, and some of you know this, but if not, it's good to keep Suzanne and her family in mind. Um, he had several things that he was struggling with, and but it wasn't clear that he would die so quickly. And so it was both expected and also a shock. You know how that is when those things happen. Uh, so Suzanne is, uh, it was hard to imagine that someone you have lived with and loved and shared your life with for 55 years is suddenly gone. So, so we offer the merit of this inquiry today to that family and all those suffering. There could be a whole list. I'm just mentioning them today. Having just come from retreat, I'm in a moment of reflection. I mean, literally, I just flew back last evening, got home a little later than anticipated because of our unsteady flights here in the islands. And so I'm reflecting on the experience of stopping in Texas and visiting with my family, my mom and my sister, sitting with my 94-year-old mother while she filled out her mail-in ballot and happily got it prepared to send it in. But being in this state of reflection, I thought it might be useful to just talk a little bit about uh, post-retreat reflections and something we don't talk about very much in this exact way. And that is the importance of integration of what we experience in retreat. We spend a lot more time focusing on what a teaching theme might be, what happened during the retreat, experiences with a teacher or others. There are many things that we focus on that seem to make up the ordinary things in retreat. And I'll say more about this. But sometimes we don't really identify in a explicit way what it means to integrate what happens in a retreat. And this may seem odd, but I was reminded of a piece from the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, 6th century China. The translation that I have here, these 4 lines, it just says, take time to listen to what is said without words, to obey the law too subtle to be written, to revere the unnameable and embrace the unformed. So I'll read it again. Take time to listen to what is said without words, to obey the law too subtle to be written, to revere, in some translations it says to worship the unnameable and embrace the unformed. Take this kind of time to open to the mystery, basically, to sit with the mystery. the retreat that we just did was of a certain kind, and we haven't used this word very much in Appamada or other places that most of you have been with me, but there's a traditional Japanese term called Denko-e, Denko, and a little dash and then an E, Denko-e. And it's a certain kind of study retreat. It's not just a sesshin, which would be mostly sitting and walking meditation service, but a Denko-e is a study retreat, and we were studying koans, the koans of one's life. And maybe it's a good idea to talk about integration after this kind of retreat, because the energy of retreat is often, as you know, is quite intense. That's why we call them intensives, because it can be very intense. Also nourishing. It might be challenging and often unexpected. And for me, and I think for many people, also full of joy. And that makes a space for all the sorrows also to be present. But I don't know about you, but often for me, I'll end a retreat, which might be quite full, and people are very grateful, and I'm privileged to be in these communities. And then we rush back into our everyday lives, leaving the retreat behind and looking forward to the next one, or dreading the next one, depending on our experience, what it was like. Pardon me. But there's a feeling of boundedness sometimes. And that boundedness is important in terms of containment, but it's as if we've moved through something. How do we carry it with us? How do we take the time to listen to what is said without words? What is that suggesting? To accord with the law too subtle to be written, to revere the unnameable and embrace the unformed. It sounds like a plunging into boundlessness, the mystery. It was a phrase I just encountered that was used by Mel Weitzman in some of his talks in the book I mentioned a week or two ago, Seeing One Thing Through to the End. And the phrase was from an ancient Japanese or Chinese, it's kind of a phrase that they would use. And they said, the cool breeze blows through the empty hall. The cool breeze blows through the empty hall. And it's one of those poetic allusions to the refreshment, that which is feels fresh and clear, moves through a space that's been emptied, opened. And I think our retreat helps us do that. We think so much of going through a retreat or some class, and then you get something and you take that with us. What would it be like to pay attention to what's been cleared out, the space that's been offered? I think probably a lot of you are familiar with the first case of the Blue Cliff record, which is one of the collections of koans. And the first case, or the first ancestor story, is one of our first ancestor stories, which is when Bodhidharma, the sort of mythical figure who brought Buddhism from India into China, and he met with the emperor at that time. And the emperor was very keen on supporting religious figures because he thought it would benefit him. And there was a big emphasis on merit. And he asked Bodhidharma, how much merit will I get by building more temples and doing all this? And he said, none. And he said, well, what is the highest teaching of the holy path. Tell me what's the highest teaching then? One of the classical translations says that Bodhidharma said something like this, in Chinese, of course. He said, this is a special transmission outside the scriptures, not depending on words and letters, directly pointing to the mind, the heart mind, seeing into one's true nature and attaining Buddhahood. A special transmission. This is a transmission, not something you get. Not depending on words and letters or scriptures, directly pointing to the heart and the mind, seeing into one's nature and attaining Buddhahood. It's a very classic entry. In fact, in most Zen temples, when the Shuso or head student ceremony, the ending ceremony, that koan is talked about. And at Appamada, we have had an innovation where we ask the student who's head student to choose a koan to reflect on. But this is the classic one. And one of our participants at Awakening Together, Christopher Johnson, CJ, this was his translation of that same, which I quite liked. So he said, this is him being Bodhidharma. He said, a distinct transmission beyond classical teachings, not established on words and language, directly pointing to the heart mind, encountering original nature. This is an admonition. Encounter original nature and enact awake awareness. Be a Buddha. That's different than seeing into one's nature and attaining Buddhahood. So I'll say it again. It's a direct transmission beyond collected teachings. It includes them. It takes us beyond them. And that transmission is not established on the words and the language of those teachings. But of course, it comes out of them because it's a direct pointing to the heart mind. And then the request, encounter original nature and enact awake awareness, be a Buddha. And it's said when Bodhidharma offered this in response to the emperor's question, the next part of the story, which is an additional part, the emperor said, who is this? Who are you? He was like shocked by it. And Bodhidharma said, I don't know. He maintained his position of not centering down on it. And then he turned and walked away and he left. And there's a postscript to the story is the sort of philosopher that the emperor counted on came up to him and said to the emperor, do you know who that was? And he said, no. He said, that was the Bodhisattva of compassion. And the emperor said, well, send my people out to get him. He said, you'll never catch him. You'll never be able to bring him back. It's kind of a funny little postscript, but if you think about it, when we're surprised because we do open to the boundless field of benefaction, when we do step into the open hallway through which the breeze flows, when we do allow ourselves to take the time to listen to the unspoken and to the Dharma that can't be written down, to the unnameable and unformed fullness of everything. We can't go get it. It's not something you can bring back. It's something that's met in the moment. And so the philosopher was saying, no, you can't do that. There's no do-over. You had your chance. And he was telling you the truth. And one of the ways I think it's useful to make sure that we don't miss what's moved through us in retreat is to take time for integration. In other words, if we just used a little story, when Bodhidharma said to the question, who are you? He said, I don't know if the emperor had said, can we just sit together? Can we just hang out here for a little bit? Would you just stay here? I don't know exactly what you're showing me, but I want to know this. Where I was staying in Minneapolis at Ryan and Emily Van Wyck's home, the two that had kind of started that sangha, there was a small dish um, about so big that was on the side table where you could put, like your jewelry or put something down. And I took a picture of the dish from the top in true Cassie fashion here, looking down on it, and let me share it with you. It's nice, huh? Perfection with a line through it and then presence. It's maybe a little bit of a more contemporary way of saying some of these things that are more poetic and unusual. So when we allow what has shifted in retreat or been realized, how do we let it find a home in us as we come to know more intimately the ways that we've taken on, maybe I think of it as a new shape during retreat, however subtly or deeply. And we know that actually the everyday way of integration is continued practice. That's the way it settles in. Um, Ongoing practice is our usual way of integration. There's the constancy and commitment to zazen, which is foundational. That helps integrate. There's the continuing work with a teacher, or some of the ways in which you support and encourage each other, spiritual friends, the relational parts. There's that. And then there's the ways you offer yourself to the community and ongoing study in all the myriad forms. Those are those are some of the foundational pieces of integration. In this retreat, there was a small piece of paper. It was like a poster at the entryway of the zendo on both the inside and the outside. And it had been printed from a photograph, kind of like the little one I just showed you, that um, CJ and Liz had taken because they had been at, Chris had been at Jikoje Temple in California, which was a Zen center that had been founded on the teachings of Kobun Chino Roshi. And some of us know about his work and his famous quotation we use in the precepts program. Um, and it was Kobun's calligraphy in English. And it said, so imagine that every time you leave the Zendo, you see this, or every time you enter the Zendo, you see this. It said, persist with affectionate awareness. Persist with affectionate awareness. And I was referencing it in one of my Dharma talks, and I couldn't quite see it from where I was sitting. And I was trying to remember it, but I could kind of see it. But when you're looking through your progressives and it's across the room on the side, I couldn't quite make it out. So I said, persist with affectionate presence. I think I had that presence, which I quite like. But the more I thought about it and talked about it, the more I thought, that's another way of talking about the meaning of the word appamada. Mindful, diligent care. Persist with affectionate presence. They're the same qualities of mind and orientation for practice. And how do we orient practice and these embodied qualities of appamada? We persist with affectionate awareness and presence. So I really like that. You might want to write it down and almost like a koan, hang out with it and see what it brings you. I had another piece, you know me, I always like to bring little bits of Dharma that show up in popular culture. This one through Instagram. And it was a quote from the musician Ed Sheeran. It was a longer interview, but there was one piece that I loved. He said, "You'll learn nothing from success." He was talking about being a musician, of course. He said, "You learn nothing from success. Nothing. You learn everything from the failures. Success happens from failing hundreds of times." This is not a new teaching, but it was interesting to hear it as he spoke about this, because this is what I was reading from Mel Weitzman. These are Mel's words. He said, first, instead of shutting down and resisting, we open up and accept whatever appears. Instead of narrowing our borders, we allow them to expand and include whatever appears. This is counterintuitive, he says. So this is the opening to boundlessness. Instead of shutting down and resisting, we open up and accept. Instead of narrowing the borders, like getting more rigid so we can get things right, we expand and include whatever appears, which for most of us is a lot of a mess. Or maybe that's just me, but and then he said, in the very next page, he said Suzuki Roshi would encourage us by saying that those who have the most difficulty and see it through will have the most benefit. Acceptance means letting go, or freedom from attachment. This is the bedrock of practice. There's no special state of mind to attach to, and no special feeling to desire, no special self to hang on to. And then the punchline. He said, and this can be called bliss. So I'll read it again. The thing he said, this can be called bliss. Acceptance means letting go, or freedom from attachment. With the bedrock of practice, the boundlessness. There's no special state of mind to attach to. That's what Bodhidharma was pointing to. No special feeling to desire. No special self to hang on to. This can be called bliss. Standing in that open hallway with the breeze blowing. And he goes on, he said, the suffering we go through is the basis of our enlightenment. We think that our enlightenment will be the end of our suffering, but enlightenment abides right in the midst of it. Our suffering will bring it out. We have to get to the bottom of our suffering. We have to go down all the way to the bottom of it. Then enlightenment will spring forth. That only makes sense if you understand that it's enlightenment that brings you to practice. That's your nature. That's what's calling you. That's what got you to come online today. No matter what reason you have in your mind, what called you is enlightenment wanting to express itself, wanting to find a home. And it's not the end of the road. Enlightenment's not the end of the road. It's within the effort. So if you have a difficult time and you stay with it and you do your utmost, that's pure practice. That's thoroughness. And it's not the result that makes the difference, as long as we're not attached to the results. So these are just some of my reflections on retreat and an intensive and the struggles that come from it and the joy and how it's useful to take time to integrate it. And I'll end with one last little benedictory quote, which comes from Ryan Van Wyck. I've read some of his poetry sometime, and like I said, I was staying at his home. And by the way, we had the first Jukai ceremony with Awakening together while I was there. Ryan and Emily, and then Liz and CJ took the precepts. It was a lovely, lovely ceremony. And this is what Ryan wrote as his response, part of his integration about Jukai, but think of it as a kind of integration that's even more broad than that. He starts with the question, what is this vow? It's almost like the emperor asking Bodhidharma, What's the deal with these teachings, Seems unusual. Ryan wrote, what is this vow that invites us to somehow be both more and less at the same time? Not exactly restrictive or prohibitive, and yet something is relinquished. There's a paradox here. In committing to embody these qualities that have been passed on and lived out by generations of ancestors, we are also committing to be more truly ourselves. Perhaps this vow is as simple as wholeheartedly embodying the unique expression of love that we are. And to again and again and again, releasing all the habits, conditions, lessons, beliefs, reactions, and pattern behaviors that obscure that expression. This vow is fulfilled in the moment by moment shining of the natural love light that is actually who we are. When we are ourselves, Zen is Zen. So, my friends, let us support each other in taking up the vow to again and again return to meeting the world, each other, and ourselves from a place of uprightness, to waking up to what we do and to letting the flower of our life force bloom. So I'll make sure that Cassie gets that. She can put it with the recording from today, because I think it's a beautiful description. And it would be maybe what one would hope that you would say to the emperor these days if they said, what's the highest teachings of the Holy Truth? This vow is fulfilled in the moment by moment shining of the natural, loving light that is actually who we are. So what things do you have that you might want to bring forward today? As we were all reflecting and integrating our lives in each moment, our practice path. And we can also take the time to listen to what is said without words and obey the Dharma, too subtle to be written, revere the unnamed and embrace the unformed. Cass?
Hi.
Hi.
Um, I don't want to jump past tenderness.
Please don't.
I've spent the last week with my mom in the hospital.
Oh,
Um, she was like an outpatient doing things, but uh, there in a waiting room 6 hours a day. And I'm so grateful for practice. And I chose to, instead of being bored in a waiting room, to treat it as I sat upright. Is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, it's Zazen time.
It was. And some of it was silent and some of it was listening to a book, um, but I paid attention to posture and um, and to this offering that's coming with her. And Ed told me last night, like there in Arlington, and like here I am today. I've got class. Um, but this morning I had a conversation with her that was the most tender of our lifetimes.
Oh my.
and I'm broken and whole. Like I'm making my hand go back and forth. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron and I were sitting right before I left talking about some of the challenges we're having. And I said, we know these things historically, but when we think, oh, this prince turned into the Buddha because of noticing illness, old age, and death, that turned everything. And that's turning everything now, here.
I feel it here. It's um
Marcella,
yes.
Marcella in your throat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So thank you.
thank you
And
for accompanying me to here.
yeah, yeah. And
We were younger and healthier.
uh and for letting me be the witness photographer during your ordination. And I've wanted to talk to you about, what it's been like to work with those negatives again. And
Mhm.
uh,
Oh, so people know Cassie took the photographs at my ordination with a very substantial old school film camera, the Hasselblad, and so those are on negatives and film. And I asked her if I could have a digital record of all that, like we do now. And so she just went through all of them. That's what she's referring to.
yeah, and what that meant is, still working with me, and I wanted to
That was 2001, so it was a
yeah,
while.
express that tenderness with you
Thank
of
you.
what all that meant.
And is Marcella going to be okay?
Yes, and aging. And a lot of this was scans and tests and things, and she was I think she was disappointed that they didn't find something really wrong. Like she was just like, well, I went through all of this and then they didn't find something. And I was just like, well, they found some things. Maybe that's not the goal.
Well, to have the baseline information will help in the future.
Right.
Yeah, I just finished taking off a heart monitor that was on me for 2 weeks.
Right.
So
Right.
this afternoon, I go to the cardiologist and
Yeah.
that's what it is. And
So I'll hold you there too.
yeah, last
And
Friday,
Aaron,
Ed just got his pacemaker on
I,
Friday.
and he was at depth of practice on Monday.
I know.
So thank you.
Thanks for sharing the tenderness with us on this moment in which you had a remarkable connection with your mom. Hi there.
Hey there.
Felt a lot of energy from you when I was looking at the screen. So I'm not surprised that you came up.
Well, thank you, Cassie. I love you. I love you. I love you. And seeing Ed and Rosemary and others, and my heart's open. Um, this vulnerable talk about integrating from my last retreat experience. And I'm leaving for Japan in a couple of days. And when you and Cassie were talking health, and my teacher is struggling. And my whole purpose is to go and be.
Mhm.
And with the help of,
To honor him.
yes. And he is so used to putting out and supporting others. And it's taking everything I can to say, stop, wait, we'll be there to be with you and for you. And he's like my brother.
Mhm.
So there's emotions, and there's emotions about leaving. Sue's not joining me, and today, I've been already missing people and not gone yet, which is a positive, a reflection of love. And today in my office, my daughter and I were talking business, and all of a sudden she looked at me and said, "I am going to miss you."
Mhm.
And I can't help but think that what a gift. What a gift all of this is. And anyway, I just want to thank you and know that, and say to you and to Aaron, we're there with you. And
What's your teacher's name?
Kiyohide Shinjo.
I'd like to hear it out loud.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Kiyohide Shinjo, sensei. And his
What
father,
is
my
his age?
first, he
What?
is my age. He's 72.
72, my
Yeah.
age.
Yeah, me too.
I'm getting close too.
And we both knew his father. And it's and here's the blessing and the miracle. So several students coming with me, and their goal is to connect with the next generation.
Mm.
And so my goal is to facilitate. And so I'll yield the floor for Robin. And thank you so much, Flint. So good to see you. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good trip.
Thank you.
Blessings on your travels.
はい、どういたしまして。
So good to see you, Robin.
Hello. I was not on retreat, but I am on a sort of ongoing retreat. Today is the 10-month anniversary of my nephew's death, and so
Oh.
we're approaching the season of a year, which is sometimes very hard, other times full of love.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was thinking about the image that you gave of, we think about what we got in an intensive, and also the what we've made space for. And of course, the empty space is obvious with Dimitri being gone. But this weekend, his best friend came by to visit. He was in town for ACL,
Oh.
and another young couple came by a few months ago, also in town for music. And Jim and I are just reflecting on it lessens the grief so much to spend time with people who knew him, which is hard since he lived in Oklahoma. But to sit on my couch here with Ben and his girlfriend, and just to feel Dimitri through this other young man
Mm-hmm.
is was such balm.
Yeah. To feel the way he lives on in that way.
Oh, so much.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to initiate conversation with the young people, they're all like 21, 22, 23, about how our culture generally doesn't encourage grief. It doesn't allow for grief. It doesn't give us very much.
Space.
Yeah. And, just really showing that it's okay. Yes, you're still grieving. Yes, you're actually going to carry this your whole life. It's going to be changing.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to see our altar to Dimitri and tell a few stories. It's still hard for them to tell stories.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I realize as I've kind of needed to take care of myself and step away from some of the roles that I've had at Appamada, which is such a just incredible relief, that I'm very grateful for. It makes me feel like, oh, I'm so not on retreat. But then realizing, of course, through you reminding me years ago when Jim had surgery, yeah, being on retreat is just kind of like it's an orientation.
Yeah, it's a temporary reminder that you're always on retreat.
Exactly.
You're this
Exactly.
formal thing that says, oh yeah, this is actual life.
Yeah. So the retreat I'm on is that one with my brother and my sister-in-law and the larger family and these young people. And it's a really long retreat. And
Yeah, this is the long game.
yeah. So thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you for coming back. Thank you for going away, and thank you for coming back.
Absolutely. Good. Well, let's chant our final 4 practice principles then as our reminder. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, Flint. Thank you. It's lovely to see you again, and to all of you as well for being here and supporting the space. It's just so lovely to be with you all. And if you'd like to offer dana to Flint, then please do go to apamada.org and you'll find a place to offer dana there to Flint and to other activities that happen at Apamada. So thank you all so much. And if you'd like to join me for a further 30 minutes, and others as well, hopefully it won't just be me, pop yourself into gallery view and I'll be with you in just a moment. Thank you all so much. Thank you.